welcome to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde, the publisher and editor of the Fretboard Journal magazine. If you are listening to this podcast, I think it's safe to say you're a guitar person. And if you are a guitar person like me, you've probably thought to yourself, if I ran my favorite guitar company, here is what I would do. This is one of my favorite pastimes. I'm guessing it may be one of yours as well. And today's guest on the podcast is living that dream. Thomas Ripsam is the CEO and president of Martin Guitars, a brand that for 190 years or so was run by a Martin. It's still family owned, of course, but a couple of years back, Thomas was brought on to shepherd the next chapter of the legendary guitar company. And today I talked to him all about it. Thomas is an outsider of sorts to the musical instrument industry, but he is definitely no stranger to guitars. He has put out albums of his own music. He has a big guitar collection, acoustics and electrics. And he even, on his own dime, built an acoustic guitar alongside a luthier. He's got the bug like many of us do, and that is something we talk about. We have had a ton of great Martin content on this podcast as of late. The TJ Thompson and Mark Stepman session from the 2023 Fretboard Summit that we put out a month or two ago is almost required listening as far as I'm concerned. Go check that out. But with this interview with Thomas, we get to talk about things that are a little more forward-thinking, initiatives, sustainability, Martin selling direct to consumers, the future of NAMM, and so much more. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope this is the first of many conversations we have with Thomas Ripsam. I mentioned our Fretboard Summit briefly. Registration is now open for our 2024 summit at Chicago's Old Town School of Folk Music. This is our gathering where we all, including you, dear listeners, can congregate, geek out, learn from some of the true authorities in the guitar universe, see some mind-boggling performances by musicians, and basically just get inspired. It's a lot of fun. It's unlike any other guitar gathering around. I curate most of it, and it's eclectic and deep, just like our magazine and our podcast. Go to fretboardsummit.org if you want to sign up. The dates for 2024 are August 23rd to 25th. Speaking of dates, our 53rd issue of the magazine is just about to come out and headed to mailboxes in just a couple of weeks. If you need to subscribe, you can do so now at fretboardjournal.com. Just click on that big subscribe button and you will start with the new 53rd issue. Our podcast is brought to you by our friends at Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington, where there are a bunch of 50s and 60s Martin D28s in stock right now. Go check them out at mmguitarbar.com. They are also, of course, known for their incredible array of vintage electrics, and their repair shop here in Seattle, Washington does it all. Acoustics, electrics, synths, pedals, you name it. They have like 7 full-time repair people. If anyone out there needs their guitar fixed or serviced, check out Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar. We're also brought to you by our friends at Peghead Nation, where you can get $20 off of an annual subscription with the promo code Fretboard, or your first month free. This is one of the greatest, most useful guitar instruction portals around, with so many former Fretboard Journal subjects as instructors. I love this service. I personally use it. I hope you will as well. It also probably makes for a great gift if you want to give the gift of better playing to a friend or loved one. Stringjoy Strings is also offering you 10% off of your first order at stringjoy.com with the promo code Fretboard. And we have a discount on Isotope and Native Instruments. Check out our show notes for the codes on those. Great software, great plugins for anybody who's doing audio editing or upping their game in terms of audio engineering. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Thomas Ripsam, the CEO of Martin Guitars, one of my favorite brands. I hope you enjoy it. Thomas, thank you for joining us. A relatively new addition to the Martin family, but it's been a couple years.
That's correct. It's 2.5 years since I joined. So, and it doesn't feel like 2.5 years. Time has gone by very quickly.
Well, and what a wild 2.5 years.
Yeah, no shortage of excitement and drama.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I want to talk to you about, obviously, what you're up to at Martin and why they brought you on, but it'd be great just to hear briefly a little bit about your life pre-Martin, where you grew up, when guitar entered the picture, and all that fun stuff.
Sure. Yeah, yep. So you probably do notice an accent. So I'm originally from Germany, grew up in the south of Germany, in a small city called Ulm, south, between Stuttgart and Munich, in that area. And I grew up with music. There was a lot of music in my house, and the music was people like Elvis Presley. So that was probably the first music I remember that actually caught my attention, and that was during childhood. And somehow I was drawn to the guitar very quickly. It was Elvis's acoustic guitar, and also quite a bit Scotty Moore's electric guitar, right? So the Gibson 295. Somehow those sounds, they drew me in, and from that on, it was guitars that always were my favorite. And then during teen years, I learned to play the guitar and got more and more immersed. Always in music, but more in the the guitar space, right? And so so grew up in Germany, and then did college in Germany and England. So 2 years in England doing business. You asked me about what did I do before Martin. So long career in business, and I was a consultant, but my consulting work was helping companies navigate through big problems, right? Like or challenges, like how do I connect better with customers, or how do I grow, or how do I become more profitable? How do I leverage technology for companies from very small, privately owned, family owned, to very big, like the Sonys and HPs of the world, or PepsiCo. So I've seen a lot of that spectrum. That was my career before joining Martin. But as I also mentioned, music and guitars and the creative side has been a big part of me throughout my whole life. So I obviously love playing guitars. I like the whole creative process. So I do have a few albums out there that are published. I also have a few albums that haven't been published, because I really like the whole music creation process, including recording and mixing and mastering. So that's a big part of me. And I love to paint. I'm a painter. So that part of creative, I also resonate a lot with. And so when Martin came around, it felt like two passions of mine: one passion for business and problem solving, and passion for guitars came together. And there's a third ingredient that's very special about Martin, and that's the people. And I've always, in whatever I did, I always enjoyed working with people at all levels, in all parts of a company. And the people at Martin are very special. I know many of them. And that was just another ingredient that just made this, to me, the perfect next step in my life. And it's been wonderful so far.
It was a lot of fun. I listened to Liechtenstein, a little bit of it. It was super fun to hear that and go, wow, this is the guy in charge of Martin. And I'll include a link to your albums in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Of course. Obviously passionate guitar person, playing music, recording albums. You were in the corporate sector, working with consumer goods, consulting, like you said. How much knowledge did you have 5 years ago or 4 years ago, pre-Martin, about the actual music industry and its inner workings, corporations do behind the gear? Like, were you tracking all this stuff?
I was tracking all this stuff. I've been a long time gearhead, so to speak. I followed all the major companies and new coming companies, through magazines, through looking at their websites, through all kinds of media. So I've been an avid follower of the music industry. And, in my prior life, we had a pretty good way to understand industries and companies in the industries and what's going on. And so I think I had quite a deep knowledge as an outsider of the industry. but of course I was an outsider, right? So it is ultimately different when you are in a company versus you're following an industry. So, but yeah, I knew a lot, and you mentioned guitar building and that stuff. I actually had done a sabbatical to work with a luthier not way before, but several years before I joined Martin, in a one-on-one setting. It was an acoustic guitar, and because I wanted to learn more about the process of building a guitar, because I collected and collect guitars. I play them, of course. I look at them as a whole, but at some point I basically wanted to know what's involved, and until you actually go through it, you really don't know what's involved. And so that learning experience was just one instrument, very different from what Martin does. But it was eye-opening about what's involved, and how much the human aspect makes a difference, right? In what comes out ultimately, whether it looks good, sounds good, plays well. There's a lot involved to get from the materials to that.
Yeah. Who did you study with, and what instrument did you build?
I built a triple low guitar in the style of Martin, because I owned some Martins and I was interested in that. And it was with a small small shop in Delaware named Dennis McPherson, not that McPherson, another McPherson.
Yeah.
But the nice thing was I wanted to find the opportunity to work one-on-one rather than in a class, and so it was a great experience. So I built it. We didn't go all the way to the finishing, right? So it was basically just to the raw guitar, and then it was shipped to somebody for the finishing. Okay. So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
And after that, I actually did think, what are the avenues to potentially become part of the industry? Because it really fascinated me. It also fascinated me because of the story of that builder, and just the challenge to actually scale up the guitar business if you really want to grow it, right? How difficult that actually is, and so lots of learnings from that.
For sure. I mean, did you get the bug where you were thinking about buying tools and like what the second guitar would look like?
I did. I didn't do it, but yeah, I definitely got the bug. No, I just thought, okay, now I'm just going to approach Martin and I'm sure they will hire me.
Well, how did that happen? Because I mean, this was height of the pandemic. I think it was a surprise to a lot of people because Martin has been such for centuries, a family-run company. Did they find you? Did you find them? Was there a headhunter involved? Like, how did all this come to be?
Yeah, so there was a search firm involved, and I became aware of the search firm during a time when I definitely thought about the next move in my career, right? And the next move in my career, I definitely was considering getting into music or creative, meaning arts. And so I was on the lookout for opportunities, and I did come across the opportunity posting. I approached the search firm, and that led through probably 6 months of conversations, rigorous checking, and all that stuff. And I just, when I reached out, to be very frank, I did not consider that they would ever consider me, because I am an outsider, right? And I recognize that I'm not a builder. And so, and I thought there must be many, many, many people. But I think what we found through the process was a connection. But I also think my background of what I had done before, and then you think about what's going on in the music industry and the musical instruments industry, I do think that was maybe helpful. And my deep passion for guitars that goes way beyond, oh, I just like guitars or I like music. I think that came through, and I mentioned it's all about people and at Martin. So I think there was a connection in both ways, and it worked out. I'm very humbled and honored that I was chosen, because there were choices for sure. But I feel I have something to contribute as part of the team, and I'm an all-in person, right? You don't get this like a gig and then I move on. I mean, this is it. And so they have me, all of me, and it's been great, really. I'm a lucky guy, and I recognize that, and it's something you could never ever plan in your life, right? That something like that would ever happen.
Yeah.
Especially with a company like Martin.
Yeah. You joined Martin during a very tumultuous, it was the height of the pandemic, if I'm remembering correctly.
Exactly.
I'm guessing they were looking for a CEO before that happened, and they probably had a wish list of things that they wanted the future CEO to address. COVID happened. You were probably focusing on that for a lot of the last 2+ years you've been there. Right. What were some of those bigger issues that Martin wanted your skill set for?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think maybe a step back, just to reflect on what actually happened during Chris Martin's leadership, right? Over 35 years, taking the company from a time when they were not doing so well, and being close to bankruptcy, which I think is public knowledge, to a company that flourished and was revered. So with Chris deciding to retire, I think a big part of what they were looking for was somebody that doesn't come in to try to change everything and come in with an agenda of, right, oh, I want to take the company in a different direction or a new direction, or here's everything that's wrong. I think they wanted somebody who can come in, learn, and work with the company to evolve, right? And so that was my orientation when I came in. I had tons of questions, definitely.
I bet.
But I didn't have any preconceived notions of, here's what I need to change, or right, what needs to be fixed, because the reality is the company had an incredibly solid foundation, was doing incredibly well in many, many respects. And even COVID, I joined during COVID, and kudos to the team before me of all the things that had been put in place to be able to manage through COVID. It was still a big issue when I joined, right? To make sure there's continuity and we can operate, and that, frankly, now it's finally we are getting a little bit out of that, but that was a big deal. So, but questions I certainly had, right? For sure, it's known that when you think about consumers now, there are the younger generations that connect very differently and have very different expectations in how they want to connect with a company like Martin. And question for me was, well, are we connecting with those audiences and the current Martin lovers that are already there, right? The channels, about that. Certainly evolving, more channels available. What is Martin doing about that? And then another big question in my mind was, everybody loves Martin, but why? Right. And one of the first things that actually happened, I remember that when we had our first board meeting, we actually did go through an exercise, and I asked the leadership team and the board, what does Martin stand for? And we got lots of different answers. And that led us then to say, well, should we maybe figure out, right, get clearer, because if we think about, we have 1,100 people, we have partners, everybody ideally should help us take that message out, what it's all about. in a way that it connects with the world. And that's what led us to actually go through the brand work we did. And we launched the new brand earlier this year. And I think it got a lot of excitement internally and externally, because it really helped us to crystallize what it's all about, right? This idea of unleashing the artist within resonates with a lot of people out in the world, and including the people that already love Martin. That's what they told us. That's what it's all about. But we have so many creative people inside Martin, employees, right, co-workers, that totally get excited about this. Yeah, this is what it's about. That speaks to me too. I'm an artist, right? So so things like that, to be honest, are super exciting to me. And ultimately, I think it helps to not just think about backwards what's so great about the company, but also think about the present and the future. And a lot of the things that the team and I have started to get into is, right, how do we continue the today, but also prepare for the future? And there are lots of opportunities, challenges, but that's what excites me about the role that I'm in.
Yeah. I want to get into what you have planned for the future in a minute here, but as the CEO, you get all the credit if an idea is great, and you get all the blame if an idea proves to fall flat. But I know it's not all on your shoulders. What does the team look like that reports to you, just so folks out there can kind of get a lay of the land of the leadership at Martin?
Yeah. Well, the entire team that represents all aspects of Martin reports to me. So what is this? This is sales, it's marketing, it's product, it's manufacturing, it's the corporate functions like human resources, finance, supply chain, IT, right? So ultimately, we have an executive leadership team. It's about 7 people that report to me, and they carry the organization, right? And we have a very cohesive team. The other thing I would also say, Chris, he said he's retired. One of the early things that I needed to figure out, what does it actually mean, right? So Chris is still closely involved in lots of things, and I'm very happy for that, because I and the team benefit from him actually being involved versus being remote somewhere. I think it is his business, it's his family's business, and it's really important for me to understand what's most important to him first and foremost. And so we figured out, I think, where he wants to be more involved. He has certain areas, in some cases product. He gets very involved in certain product projects, right, or decisions, and that's good. So, but that's basically the top level structure. So I interact with Chris at least once a week, and then our leadership team, we regularly interact, and then it trickles down into the organization.
Did you move to Nazareth?
I live in New Jersey still. New Jersey, so I have a commute of about an hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
One way. You say, oh, wow. My prior career had much longer commutes involved, often with, getting to airports, flying to wherever the client company was, sometimes West Coast, sometimes international. So relative to that, my commute is actually not bad.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I have a similar commute, but yeah.
Yeah.
It happens.
Kind of get used to it. And if you love music and listening to stuff, right? Yeah. It
is good for podcast and music consumption. I'll say that much. Martin is a particularly unique brand in that with its tradition, with its incredibly loyal and passionate fan base. I mean, this isn't like being the CEO of a sprinkler head company or faucet fixtures. Everybody has an opinion.
Yes.
How did you, stepping into this role, come up with your own viewpoint of what Martin means? Did you survey people in the industry? Did you talk to some of your fanatical fans. Like, talk to me about that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that discovery process was very important. It starts with the people in the company. I spent the first couple of weeks actually on the floor, interacting with the people that ultimately make these instruments. And I do ask questions like, what does Martin mean to you? Right. What are the favorite memories you have in your career? And as you know, many of our coworkers have been with Martin for quite a while. So there are lots of stories. So that I have to say, I connected a lot with other players in the industry, people, at various levels. And the one thing I also would say, this industry was very welcoming to an outsider, and lots of amazing connections I made, and you always learn something. And then, of course, with consumers, we reach out. I'm a consumer myself, but we do a lot of consumer reach out. There are lots of in the social media space, forums and all that. So you kind of soak it in. But then when you think about, in my role, part of it is also to really understand what's going on outside of Martin and who Martin is, and then do something with it, right? And that is where I had a whole career of training, of figuring that out. And so I think that certainly helped too. But I find these things very, very exciting. And Martin is a special place in many respects, that's for sure.
Yeah, you guys have such an interesting conundrum, because a certain subset of customers would love nothing more than you to make the exact guitar you made in the 30s, the exact same way, and at a no frills price point. And then you have these untold masses who maybe haven't warmed up to Martin yet, that you're trying to appeal to, because as a company, you need to grow and you need to be profitable. It has to be quite a balancing act.
It's very much a balancing act. And so Chris has this phrase, and we actually use it a lot, right? One foot in the past, one foot in the future. And the nice thing about Chris is actually that he is absolutely willing to break glass and think future forward, what I would say, especially when it comes to topics such as sustainability or the future of tone woods, right? But it is a balancing act, and for us, this one foot in the past, one foot in the future. We often talk about, which company can go back now 190 years. By the way, next Monday we're celebrating our 190th anniversary as a company.
Happy birthday! Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, so we can go back to the last century and, let's say, talk about some great things that happened in the 30s or 40s, right? Golden period sometimes. There are very few companies in our space that actually can go back that far and find some things that are valuable today, right? Which led to our authentic line, which you may know about. So we do think there's a lot of great stuff that happened in the past that we can bring back, or Modern Deluxe was to do a new spin on that. But then we also look forward, and I mentioned tone woods. That's a big topic, of course. And then in terms of products, it's interesting. Martin offers probably more variety than anybody else out there at our scale. In terms of the product variety that we offer. And every year we roll out a lot of new products. But what's also clear is, that guitar building is not like technology, right? Where every few years you have truly a new generation. With guitars, it is much more evolutionary, smaller changes with new products. And then occasionally maybe something that companies believe is more groundbreaking new, although even that is debated,
sure.
Right? When we think about bracing patterns or anything like that. But but we constantly are investing in the look for new materials, new designs, and part of it is where we make a bet on what might be valuable out there and test it and then roll it out. Sometimes it's consumers, right, telling us what would be helpful. Like with the SC13 model, a lot of it was actually listening to consumers, players, that want to play more on higher registers and want to have it easier to play. So it's a mix, but there's a lot of focus on what's new, what's different, even if it's incremental, right? Like a smaller change, but it might be a positive change. Sometimes it's hard to find these things, right? And do something that actually is meaningful rather than just saying, hey, we came up with something new that in reality is actually not so new. So,
yeah. It's got to be a mostly thankless job. And I think every guitarist out there has daydreamed about, if I ran my favorite guitar company, I would do this. And I'm sure 99% of those ideas are not sustainable or logical on any, but it's every guitarist has an opinion.
Exactly. And then, in terms of changing, when we talk about tone woods, there is definitely internally, right, a lot of hesitation to change materials or use of materials as a departure from what we have done things before. You still encounter that quite often, but I think we've done a good job, and Chris has done a good job to be very clear that this is a must, right? And I think when you look at over the last several years how much we've actually done, I think it's clear that we are embracing this challenge more explicitly. Whether it's reuse of material, fall off, how we use fall off, how we think about gradings of quality of wood to be used or not to be used, and it's based on the understanding that these exotic tone woods that we have used in the past, they're just not going to be available in the quantity or the quality, consistent quality. But ultimately, that doesn't necessarily mean that the instruments won't be as meaningful or great, right? Because we will never jeopardize our sense of what makes a good instrument. And so it's a little bit a balancing act, but I think the general direction is very clear, which is we have to be more responsible and make more use of what's available versus continuing to hope that all these wonderful tone woods will be available as they were in the past. And Brazilian rosewood is a good example right? I mean, you do what you have to do, and when the material is just not available anymore or it becomes so expensive, it's just going to shift. And ultimately, I don't think a lot of people complain that now we may use East Indian rosewood or in some cases other materials.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Of all the tone woods and materials that Martin uses regularly now, is one a particular thorn in your side, either due to sustainability reasons, ethical reasons, sourcing, quality, anything? Is there one where you're like, if we have another issue with this?
Well, I think mahogany is increasingly becoming a challenge. And when I say mahogany, obviously there are lots of variation, right, and subspecies, but I'm talking about genuine mahogany, which is a pretty basic essential for many guitar builders. And that is clearly becoming more and more of a challenge. And you have some people that say, well, it's temporary, but we don't believe that is temporary, right? So it's going to be more and more of a challenge, and so we are definitely preparing for that.
Okay. Yeah. And then on the flip side, what materials, maybe tone woods that aren't from the traditional guitars of the 30s and 40s, are you excited about?
Well, I think for us, what we definitely are exploring more, and we're going to have more products already in the pipeline that come out, is use of domestic tone woods, right? walnut as an example, as well as others. That is definitely going to be more a part of what we do, because they're available more easily. So the whole question of, are you taking more, right, than what you can contributing? It's much easier with those tone woods than with some of the tone woods imported from abroad.
Yeah.
So that's one area, definitely.
And I guess while we're talking sustainability, I'm guessing there are, when a carbon fiber guitar is unveiled at NAMM, everybody takes notice and does their selfie with it or whatever. I'm betting that behind the scenes, there are some less sexy things that maybe aren't worthy of a press release that you've done over the last several years to make things more sustainable that people probably don't even know about.
Yeah. Well, so last year we also took a deeper dive into sustainability, that the topic itself, right? And what does it actually mean? And first of all, a lot of people think about the environment first and foremost, or tone woods, right? But we ultimately actually defined sustainability in three areas. One was employees, right? How are we responsible with regards to employees? How are we responsible with regards to the community? And then the environment. So three areas, and we have against each very clearly established priorities now. And what I would say, and we've put a structure in place organizationally at Martin, where we have a team, sustainability team, that has members from all parts of the company. And whenever there is a decision that we have to make of, do we do this or do we do that, there's a sustainability consideration now in the mix, right? And so that has led to lots of different things. For example, we had these labels that come with our guitars, or we added, we had warranty information printed, right, and had them in the cases. Now we use a QR code, and we thought, wow, actually a lot of people are very familiar with that anyway. And by the way, it's also good from a sustainability perspective, right? So we have more and more of examples like that, where people now actually say, well, what about this or what about that? That goes way beyond tone woods or energy. So, and that I think has led to a more comprehensive approach, but also where we just think about a lot more things than traditionally would have popped up, right? We changed our batteries for the guitars to recyclable batteries, right, and rechargeable batteries, and so lots of examples that we now have, and that I think has given us a big lift to just do it much more systematically than historically.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit about products and how you see them unfolding over the next few years. But before I ask you that, what Martin guitar do you play? Or I'm sure you have several by this point.
Yeah, I have quite a few, but currently I actually play a lot my CEO 10 model that was announced at the last NAMM show in April. And I like that. Actually, my first Martin was an MC68, which is not the most traditional.
It's kind of a weird one.
Yeah. But I saw it was a used Martin when I bought it, and I just fell in love with it, and that's the one I had the longest. I played regularly. It has a different sound from what you typically associate with a Martin guitar, and then the flamed maple. So it has just the overall package. I love the sound. It's great, and I use it. So that's probably my favorite because it's been the longest with me and the family, and But I have an authentic D2837 that I love a lot. Different Martins for sure.
Yeah.
And they are all great.
That first one was like that's the oval hole one, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. It's exactly. More like Django-y kind of thing.
That's right. Wow. And good for picking. And I love picking. So Yes.
You probably have a fair amount of, I mean, I've heard your album. You must have a fair amount of electric gear too.
I do. I love electric gear too. Yes.
What's your brand of choice, or are you all over the map?
I am a little bit all over the map, but I would say just like I really love Martin on the acoustic side. I do have quite a few Fenders, and I have quite a few Gibsons, and I also have quite a few Epiphones that were made in the Terada factory, and they are awesome products as well. But as well as others, I have a cool Tele style custom built guitar by a builder from Arizona called Jim Larson. Do you know him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you heard? Yep. Yeah. And it's called Rodeo Girl. That's probably one of my favorite electric guitars I have. It's has an inlay based on the Sweetheart of the Rodeo Birds album, and Schecter Electronics, and Tele style body, but just incredible. So yeah, I love guitars, and I have quite a mix of brands, and I usually come to these guitars either through a sound that attracts me. I listen a lot to music, very often through artists that play certain guitars, right? And I associate with the artist, or I associate with the sound, and then I just want to also get the guitar. So that's how I go about it.
So when Martin unveils a new guitar, there's years of prototyping and ideas and material sourcing that leads up to that. Have you seen a guitar from start to finish, of idea inception all the way to launch in your time, or will that happen next year? Yeah, you have. Okay.
No, I mean the CO10 model is a good
example, of course,
because I was involved from idea throughout. We have product reviews all the time, right? And we see product projects from idea through the rollout at various stages. So, I mean, I usually know where different products are. And back to what I said earlier, some of the products are more a variation, right? Or have an incremental change. There are some other products that we're working on that are bigger change that I can't really talk about, but it's a mix. And the interesting thing is with a lot of these products, very often there are a lot of opinions about what the product will do, how it will be received, how should we price it. But in the end, it's a lot of still art and science, right? With a lot of art as part of it, to actually figure out, okay, how do we think about the product? And to me, that's always cool and exciting to just be part of those conversations, because I think a lot of people don't know, right? But there are these preconceived notions. Depending on people within the company who talk to, or outside. But in reality, unless you actually announce a product, very often you don't really know what it will do. And that's the interesting part about what we do.
Yeah, I mean, guitars are such an emotional purchase, and it's really hard to know what will trigger those emotions.
That's very true. Yes, exactly. So Chris Martin, he came up with a product, the D15E. I don't know whether you heard about that, right? And a lot of people obviously know our D15 made in the US. This is a D15 that's made in Mexico, and it was really great to see at NAMM that product received an award, right? And so. And I don't think we expected that it would get this reception, right? We thought this is a good thing to do, but I don't think a lot of people from the inside thought, wow, there will be this kind of reception. So you never know, but that's why the new product is such an exciting area.
Yeah. I know you can't talk about specifics in terms of what you'll unveil maybe at NAMM or beyond, Can you tell me a little bit about, is there a focus more on mid-level or entry-level or higher-end guitars based just on consumer trends right now?
Well, I think for us, there is a lot of focus on the lower to mid-price guitars from our perspective, because that's, for us, much more competitive, right? So there's, in our mind, it's much more competitive. There are more choices. So there's constantly the look of, is what we have good enough or good for what's out there? And is also good enough for us, because the margins are lower, right? So margins also matter. So so we do have a few things in the mix to come out with some new stuff there. But the other thing that we absolutely will do more is our custom shop, right? And because we know there's nobody really, we feel, who can do what we do in the custom shop at our scale, right? At the volume that we do it. I mean, you literally can ask for any guitar you want, and we make it, right? And including some of the guitars that Martin had made in the past, you can still have them. And so, and we know there are a lot of people out there that have a very high interest in that. So yeah, the custom shop is something we are actively expanding, right? So there will be a lot more coming there. And then you mentioned earlier kind of our core. It's really interesting. I mean, our standard line, it's still the biggest selling family for us, right? So and why change it when it's actually good for what it does today, and it's very successful, and it's interesting. I mean, you would think, well, why isn't there more ask for something different or new? But a lot of people want exactly that, and I mean, that's wonderful for us. But I think they're just really great instruments.
Yeah.
No.
You mentioned the entry to mid-level guitar consumer. I think a lot of those newer players, want a guitar that has electronics and kind of does, it's like these modeling amps that I'm sure you're familiar with, where people are getting, they're wanting something a little less cumbersome. It's like, just make it easy for me.
Yep.
Is Martin thinking along those lines in terms of like onboard electronics, like you did with the SC and everything?
I mean, to have pickups and that, it's something that people can get if they want.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just reality, and we certainly don't want to exclude ourselves from offering that. So we offer that. But I don't think our plan is to go beyond that, right? So meaning, I don't think you will see any outboard equipment that we connect with more easily. That's Martin, right? Like pedals or interfaces, anything like that. That's just not us.
Yeah.
At least not in the very foreseeable future, for sure not. But we always think about what aspects of our instruments or our products should be evolved and how. But I think it's very, very much tied to the instrument or the accessories that directly relate to the instrument. I don't think we're going to get much into electronics, so to speak. Even though I love electronics, and so I love it, right? And but for the company, I think we feel there's enough opportunity in what we're doing today, and the space we're operating. So, and then there's also the history where Martin in the past had tried to get into some categories and really didn't do that very successfully. And so I think sticking to our knitting, that's a Martin mantra, and that's kind of how we operate.
Yeah. Looking at the guitar industry as a whole, a fair number of companies are now starting to sell direct. Is that something that has been contemplated?
More than contemplated. We were actually the last to do it, but we're doing it, right? Okay. And we're doing it because ultimately we want to be accessible how consumers want to access us, and going direct is one of the channels that consumers want. But I think the other thing that's also really important, the direct route is a really important channel to learn more about the consumers, right? And be able to do more with consumers, either we directly or we with our channels. But understanding the consumer, and as you know, I mean, we all love the guitars, but one thing that's very clear is that the experience that people go throughout the whole journey, whether you are, a celebrity player or just a hobbyist or just passionate about your hobby, ultimately it's a journey. And the more we understand about the consumer, the more we will know how can we do something that is valuable, right? And the direct link to the consumer is a critical source of information, and we just traditionally have done very little. But with more digital connection, right, and using technology, which is also something that we all know that is fact of life now, all the data that comes with that is very powerful and very valuable, and that's probably more important than the question of do we sell direct or not. It's actually how much information can we collect on what people want, what they need, what they like, what they don't like, right? So that's really where the focus is. And if you look at some of our competitors, especially on the electric side, they understand that too, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's now pretty much a fact of life that all the vendors, all the manufacturers, they have a direct link to the consumer as well.
Yeah. As a magazine publisher, I know firsthand how important it is to know where your customers live and what they're interested in. I mean, it's a superpower that a lot of companies, especially like apps, don't have. They just have an email address. I know where my readers are if I want to have a reader meetup or something.
Right. And I think it's going to be even more important as we think about the coming generations.
Yeah.
Because that's all they've experienced, right? They don't go to a traditional print magazine to get their information, right? It's going to be online. That's probably their primary source. TikTok and YouTube, they are now the primary education channels for learning music, and that's just what it is. And you either do something or you don't do something. But we absolutely that's one of the areas where we'll do a lot more.
Sure. TikTok, YouTube,
TrueFire, right? So we just recently relaunched our loyalty program. It was called the Art and Owners Club. It's now called Backstage. But one of the things that comes with it is actually the ability to get TrueFire courses, right? If you remember. So yeah. So it's things like that are just out there, and that is definitely part of things we are also thinking about. So it goes a little bit beyond the guitar. And I think it's really important to do it, because otherwise, if it's just about the guitar, and I don't want to trivialize the guitar because I love guitars, but if we can do a better job to actually connect with people, then hopefully they don't just buy a guitar once and then 5 years from now they think about, okay, maybe I should. No, they will want more on an ongoing basis.
of course. Yeah.
Especially if you're a gearhead like you and me.
Yeah. Well, and Martin's always had, one of the most loyal fan bases around, and how can you even make that experience better?
That's right.
When did the direct to consumer launch?
That was in June. We launched that.
Okay.
So just this year.
So what are your thoughts about NAMM? Like that's a traditional trade show that's evolving and probably needs to evolve a little bit further.
Right.
How important is that as you look forward, and how are you going to best use something like that?
Yeah. I mean, for Martin, NAM has been very important, right? And with Chris being on the board and chairman, I think the company always felt very good about NAM and very close and supportive, and we continue to look at NAM as a great vehicle for us to connect, to do business, but also to show who we are and what we can do. I think the question of how NAM needs to evolve is probably a question for NAM. Because it's fact that some companies, at least temporarily or maybe on an ongoing basis, have decided not to attend anymore. But it's an amazing platform, I think, and for us, I mean, our last NAM, we had unrolled the new brand, we had a new booth. I think we got an amazing exposure through NAM, and I think that's one. I also think there's more consumer, a greater consumer part that seemed to happen, at least since I joined Martin, and the few times that I was at NAM. People talked about more consumer focus, not more versus trade, right? So trade always, but relatively speaking, a little bit more consumer, and I think that would make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think that the question is definitely how can you make NAM attractive relative to the investment, because it's a big cost, right? To show up at NAM costs a lot of money, and so I don't know what's going to happen. So we'll see what the answer is there, but we will continue to be there, and we are very supportive, and we definitely get our benefits from being associated, and we support it.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, I know our time is running out here. What are you most excited about as you look forward to the next couple of years at Martin?
Well, one thing I'm really excited about, even though the boom is over, and I think everybody understands the boom is over, I tell my colleagues very often, I'm always amazed by how much opportunity there is, right? Whether it's artists, whether it's products, whether it's how we work with consumers, whether it's the channels. There are just so many opportunities. The trick is, how do we pick the right ones? How do we pick the ones that are Martin, right, versus they're just not us? So I'm really excited about the future. I'm excited about working with my colleagues. I'm excited when I wake up or come to my office. You can't see it, but if I change my screen, you can see it. The first thing I actually do is play guitar, and I'm excited where I am in my life and what I can do together with my fellow Martin people in a space that is all about impact and passion and love of what we do. And that's really what excites me, and creating that impact and doing it with my fellow workers, and also have some fun along the way. That's quite a privilege to have that in your life, and so that's I'm driven by that.
Exciting stuff. Thank you so much for talking to us. This was great.
Jason, thank you, and definitely look forward to staying connected, and thank you for having me.
That was my chat with Thomas Ripsam. As I listen to that, I'm just thinking of all the other questions I want to ask him now the next time I get an hour with him. So stay tuned for that. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you love the show. Share it with your friends. It's very hard for folks to find out about new podcasts these days. And if you really love what I'm up to, we've launched a Patreon for Fretboard Journal podcast listeners, where you can get some bonus content and analysis and all sorts of fun stuff. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Till next time.